GLP-1 inhibitors have blown the obesity therapeutics market wide open, and what a crazy market it is. On one side of the continuum, there's the billions of dollars being spent by the vanity crowd, people looking for a quick weight loss bump in advance of a wedding or a vacation. And on the other end of the continuum are patients whose lives quite literally depend on obesity drugs, those for whom losing weight, improving the vasculature, increasing insulin production, improving cardiac function isn't just a convenience, it's a necessity to address metabolic conditions that come with a very long list of comorbidities. This broad spectrum has all sorts of consequences on the space and how its players are approaching it. From the foundations of protein selection and design to indication selection and regulatory considerations to trial design and commercial strategy and more. It's a space that's fraught with a lot more big make or break decisions than most niche drug markets. I'm Matt Pillar. This is the Business of Biotech. And on today's show, we're talking metabolic health and GLP-1 alternatives with a guy who's charting a different course into metabolic health, Skye Bioscience Chairman and CEO, Punit Dhillon. We're going to get to know Punit and learn about Skye's CB1 inhibition play in the space, a play that's garnered a significant amount of backing from the likes of 5AM Ventures and Versant. Punit, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much, Matt. It's really a pleasure to be on your show today.
I'm excited to have you here, and I want to jump right into your kind of play in the space. Before we even get into obesity, you're playing in the biotech space, and I always kind of struggle with like how far back to rewind the backstory, and we can go back deeper than this if we want to. Feel free. But one of the things that jumped out at me right off the bat when I was looking into your background was the fact that you founded OncoSec. Now, you and I talked, I don't know, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago briefly, and I think at the time I hadn't realized it, but it kind of excited me a little bit because when I read about that, I saw that you transitioned the role after you founded the company. You transitioned that CEO role to a really good friend of the Business of Biotech in Dan O'Connor, who's been on the show a couple of times. He was my guest here when he was a CEO at OncoSec after you had departed, I believe, and he came on the show again in the same capacity at Ambrx, which was, I think, just in advance of his $2 billion exit with J&J. So I like to say that the Business of Biotech platform played a role in that exit for him. I'll give myself a little.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that was your first founding, I believe. You worked in biotech prior to that, but that was the first time you founded a company, wasn't it, OncoSec?
That's right. Yeah, I worked in buy side. Started at a venture fund and then moved into biotech in 2003, and then had the opportunity to found and initiate this company, OncoSec, which was really basically driven based off my passion on the experience that I've had in the pharma world or biotech world, and there's like this underlying kind of component of like, hey, what can we do to really address significant unmet needs in cancer treatment? I had previous exposure in solid tumor treatments, and I really wanted to take the next step of an immunotherapy approach based on really interesting data that was generated by Dr. Adil Daud, and it was using IL-12. Where he saw a very strong efficacy signal in a phase 1 melanoma trial. So the idea was to leverage this cutting edge delivery technology to really enhance the delivery, such as DNA IL-12, and minimize the toxicity, which was because previously the approach was it was a systemic delivery of IL-12, which had its own challenges in terms of side effects. So the technology held an interesting promise. Patient outcomes really showed, the targeted approach was effective. It reduced the side effects, and it offered a great opportunity. We generated some really compelling data, and yeah, Dan is a fantastic CEO, and I'm really good friends with him. I have had the pleasure of following his success over the years, and was very lucky to be connected to him. I think in the summer of 2017, which led me to, kind of have this opportunity to pass the baton over to him as the CEO.
Yeah, well, they say that good jockeys make good biotech businesses, and he's definitely a good jockey. So you were making right calls back then for sure. Just quick follow up on that. Like you mentioned that you had venture experience. You worked in you worked for an immuno-oncology company. Those are two kind of foundational building blocks, I'm sure, that gave you some confidence to say, you know what, I think I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna start my own company. What other, I guess, foundational building blocks did you feel like armed you to do that at that time for the first time? So two-part question. What other kind of building blocks like gave you the confidence to do that? And then the other side of the question would be, when you did it, did you realize, like in retrospect, where you're like, yeah, I probably could have used a little stronger chops in this area or that area
Yeah.
before I went off and launched the company?
Yeah, I mean, that was a unique situation. I had just finished a merger for a company called Inovia Pharmaceuticals and merged a company out of Philadelphia with a San Diego company. That Philadelphia was a private co, San Diego-based company was the pub co. So I had an opportunity to take kind of the technologies that we had put on the shelf and see how we can monetize them. And Oncosec was born out of that unique kind of circumstance. I think the interesting thing for me as an entrepreneur was, I mean, at that time when I started that company, I was 29 years old. So there was this hugely different risk profile. And I think I having been in a startup environment, kind of really recognized the opportunity for agility with biotech leadership. If you have the right people around you, then you can really pivot. And in that business plan, what was interesting was we were initially focused on solid tumors and then more broadly focused on skin cancers. And then we narrowed in on melanoma and actually narrowed in further on the combination with PD-1. And then, so like, going from a wide to a very narrow in a few years gave us a lot of credibility. We were able to scale an organization from nothing, like 0 clinical programs, to 3 phase 2 programs in a year, and then scale into a pretty large R&D pipeline, and then getting into registration trials. So as well as it was in a rapidly changing environment. So if you rewind the clock in 2011, immunotherapy in cancer immunotherapy was just taking off because you had Opdivo got approved. Not Opdivo, sorry, Yervoy got approved from Bristol. It was the CTLA-4, anti-CTLA-4 therapy. And then subsequent to that was the anti-PD-1 therapy. So this was an opportunity to really evolve a business plan to look at the non-responders to the checkpoint inhibitors. And it really underscored kind of the need to build a strong, adaptable team, the value of a clear plan, being a public company, having, ability to have decisive leadership. Like those are the things I learned in that company, because I was a first-time CEO, and I got a chance to leverage some really good experience around me, because we had recruited a pretty large amount of large pharma executives in that organization. So my CMO, chief legal officer, chief business officer, they were all ex Merck. So I was still probably the youngest person in the boardroom and the youngest person in the management team. But it was a great experience and really highlighted kind of the importance of working together as a team and transition, leadership roles where it was needed. Eventually, with that registration program that we launched with Merck, it gave us an opportunity to move forward, and it ensured some sort of continuity and growth. And Dan took it from there. Unfortunately, that company didn't reach its data point, and that's what happens in biotech.
Yeah.
The primary endpoint in the registration trial wasn't met. In retrospect, the data was pretty compelling, but subsequently, the company is now moved on. So yeah, it's been a really good learning experience in terms of that. But collectively with that pharma experience, the Inovio experience, and then just being on the other side, being back in, I got back into buy side, and that's where I came across Skye.
Yeah, you came across Skye, and now you're exercising. We were just talking a few minutes ago before we started recording. You told me that you just hired the company Skye Bioscience's first CMO.
Yeah.
So you're exercising those, leadership pick and placement chops now. So tell us a little bit about that, like your experiences with guys like Dan and the other teams that other team members that you've built. What's kind of become fundamental to Punit Dhillon around the procurement and placement of those leadership positions, like your new CMO, who, by the way, you just told me is also named Punit. So Punit,
Yeah.
we'll call him Punit too.
Yeah, he's excellent. The CMO just started today. So look, I'm really, I guess, privileged to have had really strong mentors along the way, which I've kind of continued not only continued to leverage that previous experience, but my, I guess, principle in hiring is always hire the best people possible. So I tell my team this, we should always hire A people, and in the if we can afford to hire the best people that we can in the industry, and at the same time always hire better than we can for better than ourselves in terms of team. So that's the only way you can really surround yourself with the high performers and continue to scale at the pace we need to. Of course, there's always a dynamic that comes along with that. So you have to take the time to make sure that we don't compromise the culture that's required to kind of operate at that scale. But that's always worked out for the way that my hiring policy is that A people hire A people and better, and don't make any compromise on that hiring. We have been really successful of also leveraging kind of this broader network, right? So I'm lucky that I have a fantastic board of directors and a fantastic group of shareholders and a cap table that really enables that success in that whole pharma ecosystem that we have. So the network that we've been able to build over the last, in my career, over 20 years, can really, bounce ideas off of people, do back channel checks, a lot of the things that weren't probably as accessible when I first started off in the career, but now with our network, it's been fantastic. So I'm lucky that I have a good management team that places the same importance I do on that. And then I think the other piece of it that's been important for me is always making sure that an individual understands what their purpose is. So the purpose being aligned with what the company's purpose is very critical, because otherwise then people can easily be kind of flailing in the winds. So that alignment in terms of job responsibilities, role with purpose is a key factor that I always stress, and I spend the time with the team to kind of continue to enable that.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of that purpose, like, and I want to kind of transition to Skye and more specifically the metabolic space. Like,
Yeah.
I love asking this question of my guests who have worked in the VC space and perhaps who were in the VC space when they, planted a stake, stuck their flag in the ground and said, "Yep, I'm gonna really get behind this one," right? Like, why this one? You have exposure when you're in that role. You have exposure. You have two giant advantages. One being your experience in the space, in the drug development space, working for drug development companies, and then when you're in a VC capacity, you have exposure to all sorts of programs, indications, modalities, opportunities. What was it that, I guess, incited you to say, yeah, you know what, this metabolic space and Skye, like this is the one that I'm gonna jump behind the wheel of this one?
Yeah, I mean this was a pandemic kind kind of decision. I was working for another pharma company here in San Diego. It was a private company and kind of managing all of this Asia geography. This was a unique opportunity because I was fueled by a buy side opportunity. That's how I got involved in this company. I was a board member and an investor. So I already kind of had a stake in it, and a responsibility from a fiduciary perspective. And then really started putting kind of pen to paper on how do we build a fundamental company off of this broad area of science. So the company was historically focused on the endocannabinoid system, and we're like, okay, that is fascinating, it's great, but if we want to really scale that, then we're going to have to focus on an area where we can attract capital and leverage any opportunities to de-risk. Incidentally, I was already exposed to kind of other things that were happening in the space. I was following CB1 inhibition space even before I joined formally as CEO of this company in 2020. And I did have this kind of vision of focusing on CB1 as a target. So initially it was around CB1 agonism and glaucoma, where there was validation of agonism of CB1 helping lower intraocular pressure. And then CB1 inhibition was attractive in terms of broadly in a range of different diseases, including the metabolic health space. But let's fast forward, right now, in the last year, it's really evolved into this really compelling opportunity to innovate in this metabolic health space. And that's really where we are today. I think we can still say that, we have a lot of experience with targeting the endocannabinoid system as a company, but specifically in CB1 inhibition, I think it's aligned perfectly with my experience and vision for creating, a company and potentially breakthrough treatments that can address critical health challenges. I finally feel personally in purpose where I get to work on a therapeutic area where I can relate to this, on a really rapidly moving scale. And we've been, I think, pretty successful in the last year of where we've come from, of acquiring a company, building on the financial strength of the company, advancing a clinical pipeline, and now just launching a phase 2 study.
Mm-hmm. Let's crack into that. What you just mentioned a minute ago. Let's kind of dig into that relatability aspect. Why? Why do you feel as though this is something that was relating to you on a level, beyond, well, there's a good business opportunity?
I think it's from a health care perspective. So being in the pharmaceutical industry, it's so hard to kind of always make a kind of direct relationship in terms of what we're trying to advance in terms of pharmacotherapy. Not everyone can relate to an ultra rare disease. Not everyone can relate to a chronic condition. But I think metabolic health becomes a really fundamental pillar of overall well-being. And you can, I think now, recognize with so much literature that's out there and the prevalence of the discussion around metabolic disorders and specifically obesity, it does represent a very pressing public health challenge in our time. Mm-hmm. Because there's just, I guess, a more common knowledge and relatability around it. So beyond the market opportunity, I think it's a fascinating area. It's because of the complexity of it and obesity. The more we dig into it, we also see this additional causal relationship that it's linked to many other diseases and comorbidities. So I really see this as a space where there's a lot of innovative science that can make a profound impact. It has the ability to address, all the unmet kind of components that come along with pharmacotherapy, but by addressing on the root cause of metabolic dysfunction with this novel approach that we're taking with CB1 inhibition, we have the potential to not only treat but also prevent a wide range of chronic diseases. And I think that, by focusing on metabolic diseases, you get to have this link to improving quality of life. So that's a tough one in healthcare. Quality of life is a very tough definition,
Yeah.
but you can do it on a global scale by 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 this macro area of metabolic disease. So I'm really excited for what that pipeline can enable. And working at Skye, I really do feel in purpose on making a radical difference with pharmacotherapy because uh, although I'm not um, knock on wood, I don't have a direct kind of link to a chronic therapeutic condition personally. I think health and wellness is something I really care about. So being able to apply pharmacotherapy to make that difference, I can just see that link. And I was just being an avid health nut and athlete most of my life. Like I feel like this is kind of my calling in terms of an opportunity to really help lead a company that's focused on that. And I can see the rest from my management team too. I mean, we joke. I think our management team has the most um, uh, you know uh, anyways, yeah, yeah.
The best you cut mean figures across the skyline across the
Yeah.
landscape of the biotech industry,
I
right?
would say I'd say
Lean and
we would
mean.
have a pretty strong deadlift score combined as a management team.
I like it. Well, I always say you don't get, I mean, I should talk. I was just talking about the fact that it's tough to get a haircut as thin as my hair is getting, but I always say you don't get a haircut from somebody with a bad haircut, right? So it only makes sense that you have
Yeah.
a healthy and good looking management team in the space you're in. But this space you're in, like, I'm going to dumb this down, like to probably what's a terrible analogy. And if it is a terrible analogy, I want you to call me out on it. But
Mhm.
like, let's say like I have a, let's say I don't, but let's say I have a passion for ridding the world of household vermin like mice, right? And I think I want to apply that to a business. Again, just bear with the terrible analogy.
Yeah, no,
I want to
I
apply
see
that
where
to
you're
a
going
business.
with this. Yes.
So I go, okay, I'm gonna do, the old cliche. I'm gonna build a better mousetrap, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna be like, you know what, Victor, Victor, the company that has been making mousetraps probably since the
Yes.
1700s,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
you know what, Victor, I got a better way. I've got a different way, and I think it's a better way. I'm gonna fly in the face of Victor, and I'm gonna tackle this rodent, this rodent epidemic. In a way, the analogy fits because I'm looking at you guys and I'm going like,
Yeah.
you're in this context, in this time and place. GLP-1s are just lighting the world on fire, and your approach is contrarian's probably not the right word, but it's a bit against that grain. So rationalize that for me, Puneet.
I could totally relate to that. I mean, personally, as an entrepreneur, I've invested in gyms, cycling studios. Like I've owned, like these different enterprises in my career, and I don't think we're going to make as much those would never make as much impact as what pharmacotherapy can offer in metabolic diseases, right? So that's where I see this opportunity.
Mhm.
And I guess you can say, yeah, Skye is taking a contrarian approach by focusing on peripheral CB1 inhibition because it's really a novel mechanism for treating obesity. So just to put that in context, right? GLP-1 agonists, which is where you see most of the headlines because of Ozempic, Zepbound, or Manjaro. These are all GLP-1 or GLP-1 derivatives, right? And they've shown efficacy. They've also come with a significant side effects and limitations. We believe that targeting CB1 or targeting CB1 receptor in the peripheral tissue offers a safer and more effective way to really modulate the metabolic process without some of the central nervous system side effects that this class has historically had. a challenge with, so that we can get into that. So
You know,
ultimately the approach allows us to really differentiate a therapy in a crowded market, and address unmet needs in a way that GLP-1 agonists don't do very well.
so open up a little bit on that, crowded market aspect. I'm not going to keep, I'm not going to keep banging on this, this
Yeah,
mousetrap analogy, but like, now there are mouse traps that like they solve a problem. The mouse goes in it and it's completely enclosed and locked in, and you don't have like a decaying mouse in your cupboard, right? So that's, but maybe it still doesn't sell as well as the 87 cent, classic Victor mousetrap. In order to get that new approach, in your case, to get this new approach out there and develop it, you've got to make some noise of your own in a noisy, in a space as very noisy as it is. So tell me a little bit about that. Like, what have you done? As I said from the outset, I mean, you've got some stout backing and companies like 5AM Ventures. Like, what have you done to create some appeal where it's real easy to jump on the super popular ship, right?
yeah. And this wasn't a focus on jumping on a super popular ship. In fact, when we originally,
No, and let me
yeah,
just
yeah,
clarify that. I don't mean like you're
yeah,
jumping on the metabolic or obesity spaceship. I'm saying like it would be easy for investors, like for the bulk of the
yeah.
investment community and big pharma to go, you know what? Like we're all in on GLP-1s. They're lighting the world on fire. Why would we give a look at a CB1 inhibition program when like all the
Yeah.
momentum's going in a different direction? So what are you doing to create that momentum?
Yeah, I think so. The bias has really been on this incretin-based approach, so this GLP-1 approach that we were talking about, and that's really been driven based on a caloric restriction
Hmm.
without all the necessary additional metabolic gain. So it's basically, um, if you think about fat loss, it's really a relationship of food intake and relative to energy expenditure. So if you reduce the caloric intake, then you should have fat loss, and that's at the very basic level. That's what the incretin approaches have been focused on. We are focused on more of the opportunity for healthier, sustainable weight loss. So the regulation of body weight, if it's involving this food intake and energy expenditure, then pharmacotherapy and lifestyle approaches have really tried to manipulate this balance and promote weight loss um, through like we talked about caloric restriction, these other types of mechanisms, and specifically these incretin hormones are really driving that.
Hmm.
And what we believe is, a coordinated approach, right? And a coordinated neuroendocrine approach, a multi-organ response to weight loss really helps to mobilize all the mechanisms involved in fat and triggering mechanisms to really prevent further uh, weight gain is opportunity. So see, if you keep it kind of at a simple level, the CB1 receptor, it's expressed on many different organs, and many organs are critical for this broad kind of neuroendocrine response. And it suggests that CB1 plays a significant role in coordinating that energy balance and fat storage. And we believe that part of the endocannabinoid system, it plays a critical role in this metabolic component. It contributes to obesity by promoting this inappropriate hormone expression and increase in fat and storage and chronic inflammation. And targeting it peripherally, targeting through CB1 inhibition, we're really able to drive these other things like reducing appetite through different these pathways. We're able to drive like the conversion of fat metabolism into energy. We're able to target liver and muscle and offering these other metabolic benefits without some of the other side effects that have been associated with the central side effects that previous CB1 inhibition has been. So it's a different approach than what the incretins are doing. And
Mhm.
what we expect out of that is a more productive body composition that helps to really promote like lean mass preservation and muscle and really just target the fat.
Is that when you talk about the side effects, like if an incretin-based approach is, I think the ones that grab the most headlines that are kind of, public or household knowledge around those therapies are like loss of lean muscle mass, and also loss of bone density. I've read, and I don't know,
Yeah.
how validated that is, or what the scientific evidence is. But are those kind of the side effects that you're talking about that you're looking to do an end around?
Yeah, like the data right now points to about when you're seeing the GLP-1s show weight loss, you're seeing almost 40% loss of weight associated with lean mass loss
Hmm.
of that overall loss. So naturally, if you are losing fat, you're also losing muscle. So it's just the degree of muscle loss is which is the concern. And what we are trying to really promote is can you get a better preservation of lean mass and a better body composition at the end. So this approach that we're taking through targeting peripheral CB1 is that you're able to kind of not only convert this fat into energy, you're able to also reintroduce leptin. Leptin resistance is really induced by a high fat diet, and so you're
Hmm.
really helping to restore the effectiveness of leptin, and it's helping promote reducing food intake and promoting weight loss. You're also helping to reestablish insulin sensitivity. So those are all combined kind of metabolic pathways that are working in conjunction with this organ-specific CB1 inhibition that we're targeting.
Yeah. Okay, I want to shift gears. We're going to come back to this, I think, a little bit shortly, in a little bit. But I want to
Sure.
shift gears. For now, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about um, a little bit about the labyrinth that you need to negotiate in the space that you're in. Right. I think the last time that you and I chatted, we were talking about the regulatory scene, and I guess the way I look at it, like if I'm if I'm developing a therapy for a rare disease, I'm developing a therapy maybe for an oncological indication. I think I can kind of expect what to expect from the regulatory agencies. And I think the last time we talked, you were talking a little bit about how that's a little bit different. Like the game's a little bit different in the obesity space when it comes to developing a regulatory
Mhm.
plan. So tell me a little bit about that. I mean, is it considerably different from, when you were working solely in immuno-oncology? Now you're in this space where there are many applications for, we'll just call it at its dumb, simplest form, weight loss, right? There are many applications, many approaches, many avenues, whether that's, a biologic or an over-the-counter drug. It changes the regulatory paradigm a bit, no?
Yeah, I think that the obesity treatment regulatory landscape, I mean, it hasn't really changed in the last decade or more, right? The bar for FDA approval is showing at least 5% weight loss, sustainable weight loss over a year, and that's where the approval pathway is. So unlike other diseases where there's a different bar where you're usually doing a comparison against an active. Here, the comparison has been against placebo and showing at least a 5%. So it's different than oncology or other rare diseases in terms of the bar, right? But one of the most significant concerns is the potential for neuropsychiatric side effects, which has been a critical issue for the development of CB1 inhibitors. So just to kind of for the audience understanding, there's a historical context here where the development of first generation CB1 inhibitors, such as rimonabant, which was developed by Sanofi, it didn't get approved by the FDA. It got approved in Europe, And it was for actually halted due to severe neuropsychiatric side effects. So that included depression and anxiety, and even the case of suicide ideation.
Mm.
And those adverse effects were primarily linked to central inhibition of CB1 receptors in the brain, which ultimately plays a significant role in mood and emotional processing, mood regulation and emotional processing.
Yeah.
So there has been this regulatory scrutiny, and because of that, I think that regulatory scrutiny around CB1 inhibition is actually spilled over to everything that's happening in obesity, because even the incretin class is driving a central mediated kind of response.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a heightened focus on ensuring that any new therapies don't pose similar risks. And I think over the last couple of weeks, there was even been some headlines about the case of GLP-1s potentially being linked to this mood regulation and in some cases depression. So I think this means that the regulatory pathway for drugs like we're developing, like nimacimab, is likely to be more stringent, right? Requiring a very robust data to demonstrate the peripheral inhibition strategy effectively avoids these central side effects. And this is where Skye and our drug is really differentiated, because we've shown through multiple preclinical studies that our drug doesn't cross into the blood-brain barrier, and it stays only in the periphery. And the small molecule CB1 inhibitors, don't have such exquisite restriction. So when you're looking at it, kind of in contrast to other regulatory pathways for other diseases like oncology, the risk-benefit ratio is sometimes a bit more straightforward, because you're dealing with a condition where it's life-threatening, and they may be willing to accept significant side effects for potential survival, and which then lead to a different regulatory approach. And in rare diseases, that could also be, a different shift in risk tolerance. I think for this kind of situation, or it's a chronic condition, it's not necessarily fatal, but you want to have this long-term improvement, long-term prevention. The FDA is going to be looking at that from a mood regulation standpoint.
Yeah. This peripheral inhibition, the feature of your therapy that doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier, is this a result of was it luck, or is this by design?
No, that's by design. It's actually a stable antibody. It has a half-life of 18 to 21 days. And being a large molecule, that is by design what's absolutely kind of the differentiated approach that we're taking. So we're a kind of what we define as a first-in-class peripherally restricted CB1 inhibiting antibody that's highly specific for CB1 receptor. So it binds in a unique way, what's referred to as allosterically to the receptor. It inhibits the CB1 signaling, independent of binding to any other endocannabinoids. And it not only functions as an antagonist, but it also functions as an inverse agonist. So it signals the contrary to a CB1 agonist. So it means that it can reduce CB1 activity and also kind of reverses the signaling that's required to drive that response that we're looking for in this mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah. I generally tend to try to steer away from very process and manufacturing conversation on the podcast, but I am curious, because the last time we talked, you talked a little bit about sort of a concerted effort right now at Skye Bioscience around developing CMC and getting to the point where you're clinical ready to put this in humans. So tell me a little bit about that. Like, how has the technology matured? You talked about, previous iterations of CB1 inhibition being problematic. What have you done? How have you matured the technology to the point now where you're building, chemistry, manufacturing, and controls, and putting this thing into, actual, I guess, process practice?
Yeah. So first of all, we've just started the trial. So our drug
Okay.
product is finalized. It's being utilized in a clinical trial, and patients are going to be taking our drug. So our CMC is robust, and we have drug product. I think where we're headed now is how do we continue to scale that? So yes, like you identified, CMC, having a robust kind of CMC framework is important for ultimately transitioning nimacimab from clinical development to commercial scale. And that's what we're currently working on. So we have a 2-year plan here to advance what we're doing right now in terms of manufacturing scale to get to commercial scale. And we kind of recently outlined that, and that's moving in parallel with our clinical development. So I think we're good in terms of drug substance, formulation development. The next real big step up is the manufacturing scale up. So in antibody development, you want to continue to optimize production of the antibody, and then we need to ensure we have the CDMOs in place to continue to meet the requirements. So in the condition of obesity being such a large market opportunity, I think we're really interested in having the eventual commercial distribution scale to be able to treat this large population. The other side of that's attractive for us is that there's going to be opportunities for optimization in our formulation. So in the current trial, we're using a 200 milligram dose as a weekly injection. The ideal product profile can move towards a monthly dose or even a quarterly dose, and that might mean that we're going to go to a higher concentration. So those are kind of happening in parallel. The other side of it is also the delivery. We're using a auto injector, so that's the ultimate form factor that patients would utilize the drug.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, we could spend a lot of time talking about that. Like you look at this great big giant market, you talk about auto injectors and sort of the patient experience. At what point, this is just as an aside, I'm curious about it. At what point in sort of the development of the company, and since you've been there, did that really become an important focal point for you, for company leadership to say, like, this has got to be something that the patients embrace. The patient experience has to be, it's got to be where, it's got to be something that they're going to embrace and accept if they're going to make the impact that we want to make.
Oh, right away. I mean, when we decided to move this into development, we already recognized that that injection is already competing against oral. Both have their pros and cons. I think with orals, patients are having to kind of contend with compliance and remembering to take a drug every day. And with injection, there's always the age-old, I don't want to get pricked by a needle. So we have been focused on this from day one. Currently, one of the reasons we've been able to move quickly is we acquired Bird Rock Bio with drug product, and it was already in pre-filled syringes in a safe injection unit. So it's a unique kind of a novel approach to injection. It's not the auto injector, but it's just like a kind of a precursor to auto injector, which is just a safe injection unit. And then we move, and then as we've been kind of moving in parallel with getting our phase 2 off the ground, we've also been moving forward on having the next drug product come online. The next drug product will have a pre-filled syringe with an auto injector unit. And that's been a kind of parallel process that we've been working on. And then we're already kind of have our eyes set on, okay, what's next after that? I mean, it may not be required for commercial because there's a regulatory consideration here, but perhaps post-commercialization, there is also auto injectors with some, future kind of technology or smart technology that can be integrated. So those are considerations that we're already thinking about, and thankfully, with the capital that we have, we've been able to make those necessary investments from day one so that we don't lose any time.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I know I'm bouncing around a lot here,
Yeah.
but like I'm just seeing these great segues into other
Yeah, no
questions I
problem.
have for you. But around that patient experience and where you're taking delivery of the therapy down the road, that's closely related to, closely related to patient acceptance is healthcare provider acceptance and payer acceptance. And this is a sort of a I don't want to say murky, but it's not well trod. It's not a well trodden path, right? In
Yeah,
obesity. So,
yeah,
so
you totally want to make it. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
no, you know
I
where I'm going. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. Like, you're in a therapeutic area where you want to make it very easy for the patient to take pharmacotherapy and and have the desired effects with safely and to drive the efficacy. And that's where I think that this is a very attractive in terms of a product profile that gets to a monthly dosing, or even a quarterly dosing. Um, so that's the opportunity here, is that compliance would be it would make it easier. Patients are going to be more accepting of taking it because they don't have to kind of be worried about taking it daily and forget, and you still get the efficacy out of it. So we're lucky here with a product profile that has a very favorable PK/PD relationship and a very strong half-life, and we're continuing to look at ways where we can optimize that, where we can make this easier, amenable pharmacotherapy for life for patients.
Mm-hmm. What about the payer landscape? What's your take on that in terms of the space in general and where maybe what you'd like to see change or get smoother as you guys approach commercial?
Yeah, I think the key winning factors for us, Matt, is that really, like, you got to show clinically meaningful weight loss. We got to continue to show limited adverse events and have convenient dosing that has a long-term usage. And then along with clinically meaningful weight loss, if you can have lean muscle preservation, and if you keep patients on drug longer, then you can also address comorbidities. So those are at the broad level are the kind of winning factors, and I think that's what payers want to see as well. So the way we look at the path to success for us is that CB1 blockade will become a monotherapy approved, and it's going to be very additive to the incretin approach. And we believe that in the anti-obesity medication landscape, that the GLP-1 drugs will be widely available, and there'll be probably price compression based on the wide availability of GLP-1 drugs because of patent life, because of just so many companies that are focused on developing GLP-1 drugs and the dominant players advancing their pipeline. So insurance is probably going to cover that, and that price is going to be an acceptable price point. There'll probably be a step through because insurance would be like, hey, that's all we can manage. And then you have the additional kind of second line therapy that would be like a CB1. And in some cases, CB1 gets applied with GLP-1 because that's an attractive price point. But we don't expect that the price would be higher than what patients are paying right now. And that price seems to be becoming more competitive.
Yeah. How are you doing on time, Punit? You got time for a couple more?
Yeah. I'm good. I blocked off the time for you.
All right, good deal. I appreciate that. Yeah, because I feel like we could talk for another hour, right? We don't have another hour, but we'll try to
Okay.
wrap it up.
I don't know if your audience is going to handle that.
No, they love it. They love it. We talked a bit about the investor scene and the wins that you had recently with 5 a.m. and Versant.
Yeah.
Versant.
Yeah.
I got it wrong twice. Versant.
Yeah.
What the appeal to them? I mean, maybe in a way that you might be able to offer some hints to to other folks who are out there developing therapies and looking for investment partners. I mean, you
Hey,
can obviously rehash the appeal of the science, and I'm wondering like what it was that really attracted these two to what you guys are doing. So yeah, share that for sure. Like, what was it that was kind of the golden bullet with those two investors, but also what connections or sort of what your approach was in terms of making those deals happen.
yeah, I mean, I think the interest from 5 a.m. Ventures and Versant Ventures and all the other notable funds on our cap table
Hmm.
can really be like um, attributed to the it's definitely the novel mechanism that we have with this drug and the previous safety data generated with phase one that gives everybody the confidence they're going to have some level of de-risk associated with it. Of course, there's the rudimentary stuff. We did do a polished, or I wouldn't say it was a completely polished first one, but we pitched, right? And like we did the conventional pitch 101, where it's like, this is what we want to do, and this is why we think this is going to be a valuable opportunity. And then there was an iteration to that in terms of the subsequent pitch. So to get VC involved, there is the rudimentary stuff, but ultimately it's about de-risking, right? And de-risking for us came down to, okay, novel mechanism, first in class, differentiated. It does show really strong potency against small molecules. It shows really strong distribution. It has a really strong safety profile. And then here's the development plan. It has a development plan that can meet an unmet need in the obesity market. And Skye's approach is advancing the development at a rapid clip, and we can fork it in terms of advancing broader metabolic focused pipeline. And that's what I think made it very attractive for
Hmm.
our cap table. So these buy side firms, I think recognize the transformative potential of an approach like CB1 inhibition. It helps that large pharma is interested in CB1 inhibition. So Novo Nordisk, making an investment in this area, and prior to Novo making that investment, other buy side had funded, another company in CB1 inhibition. So you see kind of, a lot of uh, smart players, I guess, attracted to the space.
Yeah.
So that all feeds into the opportunity to invest in a program that can really redefine the treatment landscape for metabolic disorders. But I mean, it's all of this is still risky, right? Until we get further along. I think
Hmm.
we're every step of the way, we're working hard to de-risk it for ourselves, for our stakeholders, for investors. But to date, I think what sets us apart is a really strong benchmark in terms of preclinical data, a strong strategic development plan. We've been very aggressive in terms of our speed and bets that we made. If you look at our phase two study, it's the first phase two study that's going to have a combination with GLP-1. And it's a novel approach with the antibody and explain kind of the differentiation from the small molecule. So I think all of these components with a management team that's very uh, focused on farm operational excellence, it's instilled the confidence in the buy side to invest, and we're going to continue executing against that plan.
Yeah, very cool. You mentioned Novo and Versago. If you're making widgets and you got a great widget design, and all of a sudden, like one day, you're like, oh, there's a much bigger company that's got a similar approach to its widget making. You might go, uh-oh. In this space, I hear it time and time again. It's and I'm not going to say it's a politically correct answer, but it makes perfect sense. Hey, it's indicative of momentum behind this approach, right? Like it's a
Mm.
good thing. The rising tide lifts all ships. There's got to be a little bit of a balance there, though, right? Like you walk a balance between competition and being on the right side of momentum. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, we're being very calculated in terms of our risk taking. I think that Novo's acquisition of Inversago kind of highlighted the growing recognition of CB1 inhibition as a promising therapeutic approach. They've emphasized that since acquiring it. They've highlighted what they're doing in the CB1 space. It certainly was interesting timing for us because we acquired Bird Rock at the same time. So
Mhm.
it validated our strategy. And I think, not to give ourselves a pat on the back, it was just very unique timing, and it underscored the potential for nimacimab. It does introduce competition, but it also reinforces the market opportunity and the need for differentiated therapies like ours. So Novo's interest in CB1, it helps pave the way, but it also helps us really push for other strategic partnerships in the field as it continues to evolve. Because when you look at the anti-obesity medication landscape, the majority of the pipeline's all built on the incretin-based approach. Like over 50% of the drugs in development, they're all focused on incretin. If you look at the non-incretin space, the non-GLP-1 space, there's like six, companies in phase 2 right now, right? And in that, you look at really amylin as a combination with GLP-1, which is what Novo's advancing. And then there's others like these myostatin inhibitors and kind of muscle preservation specific mechanisms. And then there's CB1. So in terms of mid-stage programs, CB1 is really in a unique spot in the anti-obesity medication landscape, and it has a unique mechanism that's targeting kind of these underlying metabolic pathways that really hopefully show the additive effect with the existing drugs.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. All right, one more sort of philosophical question, and you alluded to this a little bit earlier, but I want to drill into it just a little bit more. I know that you're a health nut. We've talked about that.
Yeah.
You've been a competitive athlete. I've heard the lore, as my kids would say, about your triathlon days. You lift. You told me that you've invested in gyms and gotten into that business a little bit. You've told me that you'd love to run a gym. You'd love to own a
Yeah.
gym. I mean, how do you rationalize sort of that old school, do it the hard way mentality about staying fit and healthy and fighting and avoiding obesity with a therapeutic approach? I know it's like a just a totally like visceral, not visceral, but it's like I don't know. It's just it's like a baseline question about how you fundamentally sort of rationalize this approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think being educated in the obesity pathology or pathophysiology, kind of like I recognize that this is not a willpower thing. I think maintaining fitness through diet and exercise is ideal, right? But I recognize that not everyone has the same starting point or the ability to achieve the health goals through lifestyle changes alone. And a lot of it, I think we talked about this last time. A lot of it's like just privilege, right? Like it's like, some of us are in a unique spot where we can devote the time to do that. Not everyone has that same level of resources or bandwidth. So
Hmm.
um, what is important is obesity is complex. It's a very multifactorial disease with genetic, environmental, behavioral components. And for many individuals, even the best efforts in diet and exercise may not be enough due to underlying metabolic dysfunctions.
Yeah.
So I think therapeutic interventions like what we're working on with nimacimab or other anti-obesity medications provide the tool to really help those individuals manage their weight and improve their metabolic health. And and then also complementing it with lifestyle changes are then offering a path to this better quality of life that we talked about. So I think it's an important piece of the puzzle of pharmacotherapy applying. And I think as the pharmacotherapy makes a difference, we see these cases where people get that big um, uh, achievement, or they have a change in their weight loss that allows them to then continue that momentum with
Yeah.
the required lifestyle changes and makes it easier. So I think it's both, and pharmacotherapy has a very important role to play.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think your commitment to health and nutrition puts you in a good place to be leading that charge, for sure. It's like the haircut analogy I gave earlier. Another one I like to use is like, I'm not going to take financial advice from somebody that's driving a 1982 Yugo, right? Like you want someone who walks the walk, talks the talk, and understands the science behind it.
And we're really focused on that internally here as an organization. I mean, like, yeah, like that's personally, yes, I take my health seriously, but the rest of the team here is the same way. Like, I'm really fortunate to be surrounded by a very competitive group of people. I think they take their both like mental and physical side very seriously, and it's a good environment to be around for us to continue to emphasize what we're trying to do from our drug development standpoint too.
Yeah, for sure. So what's next on on the immediate horizon? Like, what's the next big inflection point for Punit and Skye?
Skye, right now we're really focused on clinical trial execution. So we have a phase 2 underway. We just announced that. Dr. Aurora just joined the company as chief medical officer, so he's going to be helping leading the charge. He's the accountable person there on terms of clinical trial execution. We have a milestone associated with clinical readout there expected in 2025. So those are the critical kind of things that are value drivers here, because efficacy and safety of our therapy in a larger patient population, showing that monotherapy as well as a combination can really open up and advance our clinical development. And so that's what we're geared towards. There's some other stuff that we're keeping close to our vest right now that we're continuing to do. Naturally, as a biotech with a startup culture, there's a lot to continue to create value. But the major value driver is execution on our phase 2 study.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Well, I'll let you off the hook for now, Punit. I appreciate the time. Thank you for the time. This is fun and enlightening. That's the perfect combination. Fun conversation, a lot of good information there that you've shared. So
I really appreciate it. It was good to chat with you, and I appreciate you letting me share some perspectives. And it's always you gave me a lot of energy here, so I'm excited to keep that momentum going.
I appreciate you sharing the time, and we'll be paying attention, as I often say. When there's more to talk about, we'll get you back on the show, and we'll share some more success from Skye Bioscience.
Excellent, Matt. Thank you.
Thanks, Punit. So that's Skye Bioscience Chairman and CEO Punit Dhillon. I'm Matt Pillar, and you just listened to the Business of Biotech. Be sure to visit our videocast page under the Listen and Watch tab at bioprocessonline.com, where you can find this and hundreds of other videos of my interviews with biotech builders. While you're there, subscribe to our Business of Biotech newsletter at bioprocessonline.com/BOB. In the meantime, we'll see you next week, and thanks for listening.